And welcome everybody who's coming in. I always love the Zoom where you start the webinar and then the numbers start trickling in. Ari Rosenbaum here with the second annual That 401k National Virtual Conference. There will be another one probably next year with the way things are going with COVID and whatnot. My joke is every single time I schedule a live event, there's a new variant. So I'm looking forward to the new variant that will happen in April in Phoenix and June in Miami, and we'll see what's going on with the schedule there. So as everybody's trickling in, again, we will mention it until the end of the time. We will be back. Last week we were live in Las Vegas. This week we're virtual. We will be live again in April on April the 8th. That's a Friday. That will be Phoenix, Chase Field, and we will be again live in Miami on June 24th, Lone Depot Park in Miami, Florida. We got game tickets for that night, so it's a great couple events and whatnot. So we hope that you could join us. And more information on all our events can be found on that401ksite.com. And of course, for this virtual conference, after Friday, probably this weekend, we will put both sessions online on YouTube. So if you miss a minute for one reason or another, the beauty of YouTube is it's there for you to watch at any time. And you can obviously with YouTube, start and stop at whatever points that you have. And again, that 401ksite.com for further information on all our events. And another piece of housekeeping. Tomorrow we are going to have to start at 11:30, not 11 o'clock. Pension Services, Robert Pennifield couldn't make it, some type of family emergency. We hope everything's okay with him. So we will actually start tomorrow at 11:30 and we'll continue on to about 2:30 Eastern. Today we're probably going to be about 1:30, 1:45 Eastern. And again, thanks to the beauty of YouTube, whatever you may miss, you can certainly, go on and watch what you've missed. So first things first, I guess I'm usually the first session. That's just the way you work it out when it's your event. And I hold on. I am now share screening, and now if I could only get it to go from the slideshow, and we're playing from start. And of course, feel free for anybody to have questions along the way. We can certainly do that. I could always pause and stop and whatnot if there are any questions from the audience dealing with my presentation. So let's start it. A little warning, of course. These are opinions. Opinions are opinions. They aren't really wrong unless they're based on incorrect facts, such as most discussions on my community Facebook groups. I always love to look at my Facebook community groups and just see the mental illness that a lot of people in my community have, or insecurities, and who obviously, wasn't doing well in high school. But opinions are based on experiences. And I always, interested by that one. Everybody knows that I write quite a series of articles dealing with payroll provider TPAs and the issues that I've had. And the issues that I've had are based on my experience. And obviously, people who work for ADP and Paychex, their experience obviously is a little bit different. This goes back to Turd in the Punch Bowl. That's a comment that I made to the Retireaholics when we had that 401k, the first and only in-person national conference at Disney World, right around the week that the pandemic broke, where I called myself the Turd in the Punch Bowl, which is, just being frank and honest with opinions. That works most of the time. Unfortunately, it doesn't work all of the time for people in the community who are, threatened by what I have to say. COVID, obviously, we're here 2 years later. I don't know how 6 weeks became 3 months, becoming 2 years, but it will be 2 years this coming March. And the beauty of it is, no matter how it might be, the industry seems to have withstood the issues concerning it. There were partial terminations, but Armageddon from the industry was staved off. The fact that, really nobody mentions that many of the businesses that did terminate or had partial terminations and whatnot, for the ones that terminated, a lot of these companies, local restaurants, whatnot, they were companies that didn't have a retirement plan in the first place. And so what we thought was going to be Armageddon for the industry did turn out to be, coming true. Businesses continue for the industry thanks to technology. 20 some odd years ago, when I first started out, you didn't have any access to your work email. When I would take a week of vacation off, I was just fearful of what I would see on my desk when I came back. That certainly would have been a bigger problem. Yes, we will have live events. We know that our friends at Napa are trying one in April in Tampa. They're done, running some type of deal where you have the right to get a refund and whatnot. And obviously, it's really a pause for concern for anybody doing live events. We're going to try Phoenix, Miami, and Charlotte this year. Hopefully, others. We'll see. Again, my joke. Every single time I schedule a live event, we're going to get a COVID variant. We tried that in September. We ran 3 events, and of course that was the Delta variant. And of course I had Las Vegas last week, and we had a variant for that. So we'll see what happens. Again, the technology did hold up. I think that that's something to be very, very proud of. People can actually work from home today instead of the old days when I think that people really didn't. 20 years ago, I worked at a TPA. A couple of people were allowed to work from home, and I don't know how you work from home when you have no access to your work computer and email and whatnot, but whatever. That's just me, just being a cynic. COVID is certainly going to have an effect on this business for many years to come. Why that is just really going to be less travel to outside events. I really think that you will see a lot of cutback in travel for good. I didn't fix that from last week, but there's really going to be less travel from a lot of these large events. I think that if you're not Napa, if you're not FI360, if you're not Schwab Impact, there's going to be a cutback going forward, even if COVID left tomorrow. I just think that people are going to be very, very wary of big crowds. There's going to be obviously some PTSD involved with these events. So it's certainly going to be trouble in the future to, get people going to these events. And let me try to, I moved a couple slides, and I hate, one of these days I'm going to deal with it. Will plan providers cut back on space? I think that that's going to be something that we're going to see in the future. People are going to say, why are we, paying for people to stay at home? Why do we need such a big office? There's no reason for it. It's just an unnecessary expense. And I just think that a lot of plan providers are just going to cut back and go to somewhere where it's going to be cheaper. PEPs are not the greatest thing since sliced bread. I really think that that's the situation. We have seen PEPs before. PEPs are just basically juiced up open MEPs. Open MEPs prior to May 2012, had the same exact issues. There are so many PEP announcements, not a lot of announcements of these PEPs generating any type of assets. It's all about, in my opinion, collecting assets. Audits still could be a PEP issue. I know a lot of these PEPs are just going to decide, you know what, I'm not going to run an audit. I'm just going to cut off my PEP when there's 900 participants. I'm not going to obviously have a PEP where I'm going to bring in someone on with 100 more participants, and which is the audit exemption for the PEPs, which is much larger than MEPs. MEPs, you had 100 participants, 120 on the 80, 120 rule. You need an audit for a PEP. The limits are a lot more generous, only when you have 1,000 participants or a participating employer with 100 or more. The sad fact, again, 90 to 95% of the PEPs will fail. Instead of your own, advisors might consider partnering up with larger PEPs. The fact of the matter is that we had a discussion in Las Vegas that there are one or two PEPs that have already failed. And this is a law change that's only been 13 months old, and we already had casualties, and we will see further casualties because, again, everybody wants to have their own PEP. There isn't a market, in my opinion, that's big enough to support such a PEP market. Obviously, the problems with PEPs, in my opinion, the plan providers aren't really ready for it. The IRS and the DOL didn't offer guidance that we really needed. The PEP registration guidance came out maybe 2 months before the date of January 1, 2021. So that was certainly a big problem to get things going. Still to this day, we have a lot of guidance that we still need. I still think we need guidance on prohibited transactions, who can serve as a PPP. Maybe we'll get it, maybe we won't. I have to say, from setting up PEPs, a lot of the custodians and corporate trustees still to this day don't have all the necessary paperwork to offer PEPs. So it becomes kind of a hodgepodge. And I want to have to say that having COVID, obviously certainly negatively impacted the promulgation of those original PPP regulations. I think that PEPs, the big selling point, is going to be for employers that don't have a plan. We have quite a few city governments and state governments that are offering mandates that are requiring small businesses to offer an IRA type product. Right now, just before, I was on a conference call dealing with a New Jersey state plan, and New Jersey is going to finally implement their law at one point or another, where they are going to offer it. And I really think that that's an attractive place to grow PEPs, because the fact is that most employers, they don't want to set up a plan, but they're going to have a plan in place. They're going to want to rather set one up with a TPA than the state government. And of course, the state governments are only offering these IRA type programs. Participating employers, plan sponsors, plan participants, they're better off with a 401k plan, in my opinion. Again, and I'll mention in 2 seconds, a lot of plan providers aren't offering them because they fear it will cannibalize their own business. Good buddy JD Carlson, Retireaholics, we know how he feels about PEPs. He's not afraid to admit it. To me, I think that they can be an attractive opportunity for any plan provider who wants to be in that space. Again, like with MEPs, it's going to take years to grow the pooled employer plan market. Next, again, like I said before, it's important that you don't cannibalize your own business by focusing on PEPs. PEPs really shouldn't make you lower your fee with the hope of getting it back in assets. It doesn't work out. I always say I worked at a TPA years ago. I was promoted. I didn't get the raise that I thought I would get. Instead of 25,000, I think I got 5,000. You always feel like you're chasing it, and you can never get it.
What did you say?
That's my opinion. And
Hello.
hello. Sorry about that. Again, it's important not to cannibalize your own business. You're going to cut your throat, cut your nose to spite your face. And it's important, obviously, not to do that. I think that marketing, in my opinion, should be on the delegation of the fiduciary function. The actual savings and fees isn't going to materialize unless it's a mega PEP. Again, like I stated before, I still think that there needs to be guidance out there to come out regarding the space. And again, I enjoy these announcements about PEPs. You'll see quite a few of them every few weeks on 401khelpcenter.com, but you're just not going to get a lot that, people are, signing up PEPs and actually have a space of where they're actually growing in size and having something that's somewhat successful. And again, that will take time. And everybody has a plan. I always say it reminds me of the movie Ant-Man, where they always have that line where oh, I know a guy, and you know uh, they have the opportunity to grow a PEP. They have some ideas as to, oh, we know these payroll providers. We're going to get a lot of traction. 3,000 clients that this payroll provider has, and all of a sudden, at the end, they have only 3 of these participating employers signed up from the payroll provider. It's a lot of great ideas. When you're young, you have dreams. When you start up a PEP, you have dreams as well. And then reality sets in and you realize that it's so difficult to sign up people to join any type of pooled employer plan. Other points to consider, litigation front. I still think the federal courts are really tired of these cases. We just had a Supreme Court case, 8-0 in the Northwestern case. I thought, my cause was that my cause for concern was that the Supreme Court was going to rule against the plan participants and make it more difficult for plan sponsor to sue, but that wasn't the case. It was quite the opposite. But you will see, again, I think in my mind, more and more of these cases thrown out of courts because you have a lot of sloppy ERISA litigators to sign up. They just want these quick lawsuits. They tell the courts out there, this plan is expensive. What's going on? They're obviously breaching their fiduciary duty, and quite honestly, they're not. It's just the plan may be more money for one reason or another. And, litigators are just, again, like I said, they're very sloppy. They don't show that the expenses are necessarily a breach of fiduciary duty, and that's why these cases get thrown out. I did have a question from the audience as to what PEPs are. They are pooled employer plans set up by law, effective in 2021. Basically, it's what I call Costco 401k plan, where adopting employers pool their resources together to get a plan that is supposedly going to be cheaper, but allowing for a pool plan provider to assume the delegation and responsibility for the plan. So that's that. Again, in terms of litigation, the Shell case, the court has ruled that participant data is not a plan asset. Other courts may disagree, but quite honestly, that first case said that participant data isn't a plan asset. ERISA wasn't going to cover it. So, that was my opinion. When you have a literal reading of ERISA and the regulations, they don't indicate what data is, but courts like to read into things. So we'll see how that happens in the near future. Obviously, cybersecurity is still a big deal. And we know it's a big deal because the Department of Labor talks about it. Department of Labor is, going to focus on it. They've talked about it. We do have some guidance now for plan providers and plan sponsors to focus on it. We will see DOL enforcement. We will see Department of Labor asking plan sponsors on an audit, what's your cyber policy? Have you talked to your plan providers in cyber security? Do you know what's their role and what they do? Do they have, what's the security when you log in? We've had some cases. Just recently, we had the SEC just pound on some broker dealers on cybersecurity and breaches and whatnot. We've had a few litigation cases on it. I want to say Estee Lauder is the one that pops into my mind, where a plan participant was, lost money because somebody imitated them. I think there was another case where somebody, opened up a fake checking account, sent check 100 to the TPA, and the TPA didn't figure out that might be a problem, and that the addresses that they had on the check didn't match what they had for the participant. The ESG ruling was reversed. That really wasn't, you know, a big deal. We knew that the Trump administration rule probably was going to be reversed under Biden. But quite honestly, ESG funds isn't really something that most plans have. And quite honestly, I still think there are issues surrounding them. I don't know if they're necessarily the best choice out there. But, I've been in a lot of fiduciary meetings where the plan sponsor is interested in them. Uh, the best interest rule exemption, that whole new fiduciary rule, everybody suspected that the Trump rule would be reversed by the Biden administration. Quite honestly, the Biden administration didn't want another 2 to 4 years on formulating another fiduciary rule. I think you'll expect more guidance. I think you will have more teeth to the plan, and we'll see what happens with that. And it should be interesting as to what happens. Lisa Gomez, who I actually worked at for a small time at a law firm, she is the going to be the new head of EBSA. Based on her background and my knowledge of her, expect some more guidance down the line that's going to further strengthen that best interest rule and put brokers on par with registered investment advisors. Consolidation in this business is going to continue. It just will. We see it now on the RA side. We have seen on the TPA side. We will see it continue. We've seen it quite a bit, and we will, certainly see it more and more over the years. The issue obviously is to the funny thing about consolidation in this business is that people, quite honestly, a lot of small providers are fearful. And to me, I wouldn't be fearful. I consider this as an opportunity to be successful, differentiate yourself in the marketplace. The larger plan providers, folks who aren't on the phone call today, the Empowers of the world, to generate the greatest amount of revenue, they're going to streamline and prune smaller plans or lines of business that don't generate enough return. I have some plans with Empower, and one plan in particular, I do see a cutback in terms of service, in terms of support. And of course, unfortunately, when we have consolidation in this business, a lot of good people are put on waivers. Again, if you're not a large plan provider, it's an opportunity. Marketing, you see what the competition does and what you do that is unique. This isn't the cola business. There's plenty of business for everyone. Other points to consider: crypto is not going to happen. The Department of Labor isn't going to allow it until the day that crypto is regulated. The restatements for DC plans are going to be by July 2022. ERISA attorneys are going to have to eat as well. Again, because this is my show, I want to tap the events that we're having coming up, and of course, expect a COVID variant with each. April the 8th, we will be in Phoenix, Chase Field, Miami, Lone Depot Park, and we will be at the Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte, North Carolina. Dependent on how COVID plays out, we may have an event in September. We may have another event in June. We'll see what happens. We're going to play it by ear. You plan these events and God laughs, as they say. So we'll see what happens with that. I do have another question. Mike Webb, always with the great questions. Given that plan sponsors are far from cybersecurity experts, should they hire ones to ensure that their plan assets are secure, particularly if the risk is high? They sponsor mega plan. If you're a large employer, obviously, you obviously have probably people on staff or people who are not on staff. I think there'll be further and further guidance. I think first, I think it's important to identify how plan providers are handling cybersecurity before the concern is on plan sponsors. And plan providers, most TPAs are quite honest and transparent when it comes to cybersecurity. So I'm not really concerned that small plans are going to have issues. Again, what I see happening is plan sponsors being asked on, you know, really, again, it's the same thing back in the day when I had to deal with audit. They would never ask a plan sponsor about the investment policy statement. It goes back to, remember those days in the 70s and the early 80s when nobody knew what their blood pressure was, and they did campaigns to make sure what their blood pressure was, and then it became the cholesterol and whatnot. I think that cybersecurity, it's going to be a eye opener, a discussion, and for plan sponsors to get more up and up in terms of understanding what their role is, and you know identifying what the issues are and the need to understand that having a TPA that's using Windows 95 as their IE Internet Explorer as their browser is probably not the best idea. And then I think that's what is going to be the issue going forward. It's ball bearings these days, and that's my presentation. And hope you enjoyed it. If there are any other questions out there. Okay, we are going to be a couple minutes away from our next presentation, so we're just going to take a 2-minute break. Okay, back as we got a show to run, and as we are running events, as I always say, we're live, pal. Obviously, there's always changes in the program. So right now at 11:30, we're going to have Bill Shorey's on from Invesco. Then when I get in touch with Lyle, we'll see where we can fit him back into the program. But Bill, not only is Bill a great Mets fan, and if I recall, Bill is a big Giants fan, but he's also one of my best friends in the industry. I know him way back when I was a lowly ERISA attorney at a certain TPA in New York City. And Bill's been a friend ever since, and he's been a supporter ever since. He was one of the two people when I came up with the idea of that 401k conference that think I was absolutely crazy. and supported that event. And hopefully we'll get one at Yankee Stadium this year. We're working on it. I got to get my buddy Larry on it. And so, Bill, take it away.
All right. Well, I'm going to ask you to indulge me for two things. One, I tested positive yesterday, so I finally joined the club here.
That's some club. Yeah, I've been joining that club as long as I can. I hope you feel
I'm vaxxed and boosted, so it's not too bad, but a little bit under the weather, so bear with me on that. And, you and I didn't speak beforehand, but I'm hoping everybody can see my camera. I'm going to do this. Ari doesn't know I'm going to do this, but he mentioned I'm a Mets fan. And I have here a copy of the Mets 1974 yearbook.
That's right.
And you could see I was 7 or 8 at the time, depending on the time of the year. My mother wrote my name on the top. But just in keeping with the Mets tradition, if you look at the bottom of this yearbook, look at the word official.
I didn't even notice that. You know how many times I've seen that? I haven't even noticed that.
They misspelled the word official on their yearbook. I've had this for 47 years and I never realized it until somebody posted it on the Shea Stadium Facebook page 2 days ago.
Yeah, I never noticed it. Yeah.
Only the Mets. So, I have, and they revised it during the year. So I have one of the misprinted editions. So anyway, it's just funny that you mentioned about the Mets fan, and I had that sitting next to me here. So, all right. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm happy to be here. For those of you that don't know me, I am the National Sales Director for DCIO at Invesco. Ari, from a technical point of view or technology point of view, my presentation, do you bring that up or?
No, you bring it up. You could bring it up on the share screen.
All right, let me do that now. Where is the share screen on Zoom? Because I've been doing mostly, oh, there it is. I've been doing mostly Teams calls. So, all right, so can you all see my screen now or no?
Not yet.
Oh, there it is, share. How about now? Are we good now?
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, so let me just finish introducing myself. I'm the National Sales Director for DCIO for Invesco. I had spent over 20 years at Oppenheimer Funds. I was the wholesaler for DCIO for New York City, Long Island, Westchester for over 20 years with Oppenheimer Funds. In 2019, Invesco acquired Oppenheimer. And with some internal shakeups here, I got promoted to the National Sales Director role in February of 2020. And then in March of 2020, everything shut down. So I've been the National Sales Director, but I haven't really been anywhere other than this chair since that promotion took effect. As Ari mentioned, he and I go way back. We've known each other for close to that full 20-year time period. And he's one of the good guys in the industry, always willing to help out and contribute and help advisors with their efforts with their clients. So if you're new to working with Ari or this is your first introduction to him, he is one of the few ERISA attorneys that is very friendly to financial advisors, will consult with you, help you solve your problems, and really understands your role in the advisor, plan sponsor relationship. So when Ari approached me to participate and sponsor the conference, I was trying to think of topics that might be timely. I presented at this one of the conferences a couple of years ago before COVID at Giant Stadium. So I didn't want to just repeat the same presentation there. So I came up with this topic, this presentation that Invesco has. It's called Talk Plan Act, and it's part of a series of presentations that we run. The other two are called Financial Literacy, which is over 100 slides. And I didn't want to burden anybody with 100 slides. And that is really anything and everything, financial literacy related, from children all the way through the lifespan to leaving a legacy. So it goes through how to talk to your kids about money, marriage, saving for a home, college, every aspect or every stage of life. So if anybody would like to get copies of these presentations, you can email Ari. I'll give you my email now, and then at the end, it's william.schories, SCHORIES, at Invesco.com. I'll repeat that later, or just email Ari, and we can get that to you. It's the financial literacy presentation. This one, which is Talk Plan Act, And then the third one is compelling wealth management conversations, which is more focused on the retail side of the business. So Ari, I forgot I was sharing my screen. I clicked on the Q&A. So if there's any questions for me in the Q&A, I'm not going to toggle and look at that. If you can just keep an eye on that. And I'm happy to be interrupted. So I'm married with 2 kids. I usually don't get to finish a sentence at home. So it will not bother me if you ask questions. I actually prefer interaction during the presentation. So with that, we'll get started here and go through this presentation. But as you can see here, there is a lot here. What Talk Plan Act does is it goes through the different components of saving for retirement and being in retirement. So the retirement landscape, the biggest expense in retirement is healthcare. Social Security is a big component about retirement. We all talk about saving for retirement, but from the scope of women, the challenges that they face, which are more dire and more challenging than what men face, as just in the terms of general demographics. And then a quick discussion on understanding Medicare. And I say a quick discussion because understanding Medicare, is a very long discussion, but for just, generalities here, we'll keep it brief. So you can see this presentation is broken into modules. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different modules. And the way we've used this over the years is for the financial advisors out there that have plans that go in and do education meetings. After you do a participant education meeting 2 or 3 times, you show up for the 4th time, the 5th time, the employees know what you're going to say before you say it. You're going in giving the same, presentation over and over again, slight differences based on market performance here and there, but the messaging is the same about saving and compounding and tax deferral. So this presentation has been very helpful for advisors because you can take each of these 6 components and break them out and use them as a bolt-on to your typical education program. So for your next 6 education meetings, you'll have new content. You just use a different chapter each time. When we break this down a little bit further, you can see the retirement landscape is broken into further bullet points. Healthcare and retirement, you have a lot. Social Security savings. So that's what we're going to walk through during this presentation, hopefully with some interaction and some questions. So let's look at the retirement landscape first, and I'm going to apologize in advance. I'll probably have to stop a couple of times to take a sip of water because of the cough and the cold I have with COVID here. But the retirement landscape, how we recognize the retirement landscape is basically walking down this road. We start off in life with some savings accounts, child savings, savings bonds. We get a job, we start putting money into the bank. We eventually get a full-time job, start contributing to a 401k. You have, hopefully some of you, if have relatives that work in the public sector or unions, you'll still have pensions out there. So these 3 are generally what are recognized as the 3-legged stool in retirement. Personal savings, 401k, pensions too, and then Social Security over here. But as we go through life, things come up. Myself, for example, I'm 56. My mother-in-law, my wife's mom, she's 95, so we're now taking care of her. My parents are approaching 80. So we're now, and I have 2 kids myself. So we're in that sandwich generation. If you have kids, you're probably paying off college loans simultaneously. As you get past this age now, healthcare costs start to become more and more of a concern. And then Social Security can kick in as early as age 62. But the vast majority of us are not ready to retire or able to retire at age 62. And then finally down the road, we get to retirement. So, but what does that mean? There was a great line in Yellowstone, for those of you that are watching Yellowstone, on the last episode or the second to last episode, that I think it was the daughter that she said, and she's a character if you watch that show, but she said to Kevin Costner's character, life is not a longevity contest. It's not, about how long you live. It's about the quality. And that's what this, this slide is enforcing along with the next one. It's not about how long you live. It's about the quality in your years. And you can see the life expectancy. Now, this is pre-COVID, 78, almost 79 years old. And if you look at this, if you're a married couple, age 65, the chances that one of you will make it to 75 is just under 100%. The chances that one of you will make it to 80, is still very high. It's an 80% likelihood if you're a married couple at 65 that one of you will make it to 85 years old. And so, you can see for the men and the women, but jointly that one of you will live to 90 is still a 60% probability if you're both alive and healthy at age 65. So you have to start, thinking about these long-term issues in retirement. So cost becomes the bigger issue, and we all know healthcare is the largest expense in retirement. So cost projection for a married couple, at age 65 is $12,000 a year. Now that includes out-of-pocket, deductibles, co-pays, prescriptions, Medicare Part B and D premiums, supplemental healthcare coverage, and you can see these costs do not go down as you get older for a married couple. We want to look at percentages of seniors living in nursing homes, how these numbers go up dramatically as we age. And then you have inflation, as a concern over a longer life period. A movie ticket 30 years ago was $5. Now it's double that. It's $10. And if you live in this area, the New York City metropolitan area, it's $12, $13, $14, depending on the theater. The example I always use with inflation is, as I mentioned earlier, I gave away my age. I'm 56 years old. So I was born in 1966. In 1966, if I had $5,000, I could have bought a Cadillac. In 1986, my $5,000 got me a Hyundai. Now today my $5,000 gets me an expensive mountain bike, and that's true. Unfortunately. So in my lifetime, and I don't think I'm that old, $5,000 has gone from a Cadillac to a bicycle. So you need to outpace inflation no matter what you're doing when saving for retirement. The other thing is a lot of people think they're going to work in retirement. That doesn't reflect reality. If you look over the years, you could see 73% of workers expected to work in retirement. In reality, only 27% were able to. Those numbers have changed, over time slightly, but the percent working in retirement, actually has pretty much stayed the same from 1999 to 2019. Now, 2009, that jumped a little bit because of what happened in the markets. People had to go back to work. They were forced with the financial crisis. But if you look at the reality, a lot of people, say, oh, I plan on working in retirement, but try getting a job when you're 65. There's not supposed to be age discrimination, but unfortunately there is. Sometimes people's health declines and they're unable to work, or a spouse's health declines and they can't go back to work even though they want to. So what people want to do and what actually starts happening are vastly different. So if your game plan to supplement your retirement is to continue working or work in retirement, and this is your messaging to participants as you're doing these education meetings, they might want to have a backup plan because you can see that doesn't always happen. Inflation we talked about. Now, these aren't, this is a comparison of what has gone up faster than the rate of inflation. And again, this is pre-COVID and doesn't reflect the inflation period of today. This is through December of 2019. Unfortunately, inflation hasn't been tamed the first few months of this year and the last couple of months of last year. But up until then, this just shows certain goods and services that have increased in price way faster than the rate of inflation over the past 20, 30 years. So hospital services, that's healthcare. That's our biggest expense in retirement. Medical care services, hospital services. So again, this is why it's so critical to be saving for retirement, because the biggest expense components in retirement are rising at a much faster rate than inflation. Have people underestimated their expenses in retirement? Well, very few people underestimate the expense. I mean, overestimate. They're saying, expenses are lower than expected. Very few. Half the people are saying, yeah, they're about the same. But in terms of healthcare expenses, 36%, they're saying they're much higher than expected. Well, higher and much higher. And for travel and leisure, only 22% are saying they're higher than expected. So travel and leisure right in line with people's expectations. Healthcare, 50% in line, but then you have a good 35, 34, 35% saying it's higher than expected. And what happens when the expenses are higher than they expected? Well, they have to look to reduce expenses somewhere else, adjust budget, draw down savings, go back to work, cut back on insurance, go into debt, or put the hand out for the family or the kids to take care of them. So that's the retirement landscape, what the picture of the of retirement looks like in America now. So we started off with this roadmap. We went to the life expectancy, for individuals, and combined for one person out of a married couple at age 65, the likelihood that they'll live to a certain age. Cost considerations, you can see the rising cost of healthcare, ability or frequency that people will actually work, and then the impacts of inflation. So now let's take a look at healthcare in retirement. As we said, that is the biggest concern and the biggest expense. And the financial services industry as a whole has done an okay job. I wouldn't say a great job, but an okay job of messaging people that they need to save for retirement. You saw the commercials on TV. What's your number? How much will you need? But there's not a lot of information about what that money is going to be spent on. What's the biggest expense? How do you spend down those dollars? And that's where HSAs come in. That's where having an understanding of the healthcare system comes in. On a side note, I'm on the board of trustees of a hospital here in New Jersey, Central State Medical System in Freehold. And that's really given me an ability to look at this issue from two sides, one from the medical side and two from the investment side. So in my role at Central State and my role at Invesco, I've really got an appreciation of what the future of healthcare is becoming. And you can see it every day as you drive around your towns. People don't go to the emergency room anymore, unless it's really an emergency. If you drive past any, commercial area of your town, a strip mall, you will see urgent care centers that have popped up over the past 5 or 10 years. So everybody goes to these urgent care centers now because they don't want to go to the emergency room. Why? Because it's cheaper. It's easier, it's more convenient. So people are taking more control over their healthcare spending. It's becoming more consumer driven. In years past, we didn't care how much healthcare cost. We would go to the doctor, here's my $20 copay, I'm done. My health insurance is covering the rest. It's a lot different now, especially with the advent of these high deductible health plans, because now we have a $3,000 deductible if you're in an HDHP, and we're concerned how we spend those dollars. But let's take a look at this. So the longer you live, the more you'll spend on medical expenses. That's pretty much a no-brainer. So this, is a repeat of that earlier slide showing the annual cost of a married couple in medical premiums, out of pocket, prescriptions, again, Part D, Part B, and so on. And this is per year. And at age 35, it's $37,000 a year is the expectancy, for a total of over $600,000 for a married couple. Going from age 65 all the way out to age 90. So you can see it's a very substantial amount of money. But to my earlier point on that quote from Yellowstone, the question isn't how long will I live, it's how long will I be healthy? Because that dictates how active I'll be, how much I'm able to spend. Will I need to be in a medical facility? Am I going to be able to travel? So if you look at this, and again, this is pre-COVID, this is through 2020, cancer was the leading cause of death, heart disease was the leading cause of death, followed by cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes. Medical advances coupled with living healthy make living longer and better a possibility. So the fact that we're going to be living longer on average, you really need to plan, for retirement. But healthcare costs have been rising, but there are new strategies to deal with this. There are apps now where you can actually shop. You can type in a zip code and put in MRI, and it will give you price comparisons on where to get an MRI and the pricing. You have all these smartphones and the Apple Watches where you can take your vitals at home. Telemed, we can do that now. So you're having, the technology component drive down healthcare costs and make it easier for us to monitor our health and remain healthy longer. HSAs have been, revolutionary in terms of what they can do for retirement savings and for health savings. This is one of the most underutilized benefits that are out there. Now, I'll give you the 2022 numbers. We haven't updated the slide yet. But for 2022, an individual can put away $3,650. A family can put away $7,300 this year. The catch-up, unlike the 401k, the catch-up kicks in at age 55, not at age 50. So I'll give you an example. So for me, Invesco has an HDHP. I'm putting in $8,200 into my health savings account. Now, I'll go over more of this on the next few slides because there really are some strong benefits here. The maximum deductible that the minimum deductible to qualify as a HDHP is $2,900 for this year. It was $2,800 last year, but if your deductible is lower than that, it's not considered a high deductible health plan and you can't access an HSA. So to be a high deductible health plan, your deductible has to be a minimum last year of $2,800. But they do come with out-of-pocket maximums. So even though you have that deductible of that, you will not have to, under any circumstances, pay more than $7,000 as an individual or $14,000 as a family for healthcare expenses before the insurance, fully kicks in for out-of-pocket, depending on the policy. But let's look at some of the benefits of the HSA. And Ari, if there are questions, just fire away at me as they come in. So let me take a sip here of my coffee.
Well,
Any questions so far?
Yeah, there are quite a few questions actually. Can I get a copy of presentation?
Yes, at the
email again.
At the beginning, just email me. It's william.schories, SCHORIES @Invesco.com, and I can send you, certainly this one, the other one I mentioned, financial literacy, and the compelling wealth. Happy to send out all three to whoever requests them. Or if you didn't get my email, just email Ari and he'll funnel me your name and contact info.
Exactly. And two other questions. Given the increased lifespan and related greater healthcare costs, doesn't that elevate HSAs from a supplemental retirement offering to more of a must-have?
Yeah, I mean, that's why, I started this component saying this is revolutionary in terms of what it can do as part of a retirement savings and a healthcare coverage point of view in retirement. Unfortunately, not everybody has access to an HSA because your employer must offer a high deductible health plan in order to utilize an HSA. If you're not covered by an HDHP, a high deductible health plan, you cannot contribute to an HSA.
Okay. And last but not least, well, as soon as I answer, there's more questions. Observation: as advisors, we need to do a better job not only of pointing out the reality disparity between working and retirement, those that actually do versus believe they will, but discussing ways to prepare beyond financials. I'm a reality of what I'm saying. Corporate career ended 49. Now I'm near age 60 as a financial advisor, working for myself until he doesn't know when. Advisors can play a part in this transition for the client. You'll be rewarded for playing this role via retention happiness of your clients. I guess that was more of an observation.
Yeah, I was going to say that sounded more like a statement than a question, but I don't disagree with any of that.
And someone had said, can you talk about 401h? That's not really your cup of tea, right?
Yeah, so the answer to that is no, I can't talk about 401h because it's not my cup of tea. I don't know enough about it to be helpful to you. So
Peter Hibbard tomorrow, he'll have a presentation and he's probably the perfect guy to talk about 401h.
Okay. Yeah, I would leave that to somebody else. I apologize for not being the subject matter expert on that, but
okay,
I learned a long time ago through my marriage that I don't know is a really good answer sometimes.
Yeah, how many times you work in retirement plan space and the person says, oh yeah, I can do it. And I'm like, no, they clearly can't.
Right. So All right, so let's, any other questions or comments in the chat that I should be aware
That's
of, or
That's it.
we're good?
Yep.
All right, so let's look at some of the vital stats on HSAs. There's no time limit for using this money. So I can contribute to my HSA now, right? And it doesn't have to be spent. It's not a use it or lose it type of thing, like some of those flexible spending accounts are. So there's a big misconception there because people get confused. Oh, if I don't use this money by the end of the year, I forfeit it. That's not the case with HSA. HSAs are portable. You can open it anywhere. Like my HSA at Invesco is through my insurance company, but you know, twice a year, or I think it's actually quarterly, I can roll that over to another HSA at Fidelity or somewhere else if I don't want it sitting with my insurance company. HSA money can be invested. So let's say I mentioned before, I can do the $8,200, the $7,200 plus the $1,000 catch up. But let's say I only have $2,000 in medical expenses. Well, I contribute $8,200. I have over $6,000 left in the account. Rather than just leave it in cash, I can invest it in mutual funds and let it grow. Put it in QQQ, put it in the S&P, put it in bonds, whatever I think is a good mix. I can mirror my 401k investments and have a similar allocation and let it grow and not spend the HSA money. Other people, you know, put the HSA money in there and then they use it right away and spend the money. Other people put money in the HSA and don't spend it, and they just leave it there and wait for retirement, which I'll get into. There's a triple tax break. So the way HSAs work, let's say I put in that 7,200 or 8,200 with the catch up, that is tax deductible. So it's just like a pre-tax contribution. The money then grows tax deferred. You know, well, I shouldn't say tax deferred, it's tax free because it grows without taxes. And the reason it's not tax deferred, the reason I say it's tax free is if I use that money for medical expenses, I don't pay tax when I take it out. So it basically becomes a Roth with a deduction, you know, as long as I use it for medical expenses. Now, the great thing about HSAs is, let's say I have money in my HSA and I have a medical expense of $100 today. I can take $100 out of my HSA now to cover it. Or I can say, you know what, I have the receipt. I'm going to stick the receipt in a shoebox and hold on to it. And then in 10 years, when I'm 65 and I want to take money out for retirement, I can say, oh, I used $100 in 2022 for a medical expense. I'm taking $100 out of my HSA to cover that medical expense from 10 years ago. And as long as I can document it with that receipt, I'm fine. So even if I have a medical expense today, I can pull money out of the HSA 20 years from now to reimburse myself for a prior medical expense. And that's called the shoebox method with HSAs. So I don't know if that got confusing or not, but if you have a medical expense, there's no time frame that you need to take the money out of the HSA to pay for it. I can pay it out of pocket today and reimburse myself 20 years from now and say, hey, that was for a medical expense. That's a valid HSA distribution. Meanwhile, 10 years from now, I use that money to play around the golf. But technically, I used it to, sorry about the phone ringing in the background, but I used that money to cover a medical expense, okay? Let's look at some of the caution flags with HSAs. Once I'm eligible for Medicare, Medicare, I can't contribute to an HSA. If I use the money for non-medical expenses and I don't have receipts for prior medical expenses, then it's taxed as ordinary income. If prior to age 65, I pull money out of my HSA to pay for a washer and dryer, it's a 20% penalty and income taxes. So save your receipts. Anytime you pull money out, you just have to find a receipt that equals, or a series of receipts that equals the amount distributed, and you're covered. But trust me, when I'm 70, 75, I don't think I'll need to go back and get receipts from when I was 55, because I'll probably have other, plenty of medical expenses that I can say, hey, this is for a medical expense today, whether it's a knee brace prescription glasses, whatever it might be. Another strategy with HSAs that doesn't get talked about enough, and anybody in this situation like this, I would ask you to really pay attention to this because it's really effective. I'm going to use myself as another example. My daughter is 23 years old. She's still covered under our health insurance, which, we can cover her under our health insurance until 26. So she's covered under our health insurance. She's working full time. We told her, hey, decline the health insurance coverage at your job. You're still covered under mom and dad's health insurance. So that saves her money right away. We have a high deductible health plan. So we have an HSA, but a family HSA. But because we no longer claim her as a dependent, we cannot use our HSA dollars on any of her medical expenses. So even though she's covered under the family plan with insurance, she doesn't have access to the HSA dollars that we contribute to the plan because we no longer claim her as a dependent. So the tax code allows my daughter to set up her own HSA. And because she's covered under a family plan, she can contribute the family rate of $7,300 this year. So if you have high net worth clients that have adult children that are not claimed as a dependence, but are 26 or under the age of 26, and there's an HDHP, the child can put away up to $7,300 this year. So for my daughter, my wife and I can gift her $7,300 because it's under the gift tax limit. She can then contribute that $7,300 to the HSA when she's 23, 24, 25, and 26. So that's like 30 grand that she can put into an HSA each year. She gets the tax deduction on it. And then because she's in her mid-20s, she gets 40 years of tax-free growth on that money. And then when she's 65, she can start pulling that money out for health-related expenses. So it's just a really neat strategy that the code allows for adult children that can't be claimed as a dependence that are covered under HDHPs. So I see a lot of chats and a lot of questions. So there you go. All right.
Okay. In your opinion, what is the best HSA company, particularly from an investment perspective?
Yeah. So Fidelity does a really nice job. HSA Bank is another one. And there's a lot of them. So I don't know. Those are just the two that I'm familiar with and have some experience with. I'm sure there are plenty of others. You do want to, ask some questions with your HSA providers because some of them are only a bank and the money just sits in cash. Others that do allow investments will only allow investments with certain account minimums. It might be 10 grand, it might be 5 grand, it might be 20 grand. So find out if there are minimums for investments. And then obviously you want to ask about fees. So if you find somebody with, that opens the door to investments, that has low account minimums, the fees should be reasonably close to the other providers that are doing the same thing. But if somebody has low account minimums, access to full investments, but their fees are a little higher, I wouldn't, turn away from them to go to somebody who only lets me sit in cash or has a much higher account minimum. So it's just, those are the three factors you want to look at: fees, account minimums, and the range of investments. All right, so that's, tax consequences of HSAs. We'll just wrap up here. If your spouse is a beneficiary, he or she may maintain the HSA in his or her name, nothing changes. May access funds for qualified medical expenses. If you were the person with the, in my case, the HDHP is from my job at Invesco, not my wife's. If I passed away, my wife wouldn't need to be in an HDHP to maintain the HSA because she's the beneficiary of mine. If it's a child, the HSA is liquidated and account value becomes taxable as income for the beneficiary in the year of death. There's no penalty, but it becomes taxable to the beneficiary if it's not my spouse. Okay. If it's not a spouse or a child, the HSA is liquidated and total distribution is included on the deceased HSA's owner's final tax return. It's, it's distributed to the estate. And then let's look at the costs. This is more on the cost of healthcare. Who's going to change your light bulb when you're 85? I had mentioned before, my mother-in-law, 95, she's not climbing up on a step ladder anymore to change the light bulb in the kitchen. Who's going to do it? A private room in a nursing home, that's the highest cost, for the year, $102,000. Assisted living facility, $48,000. Home care, home health aid, $52,000. Home care, homemaker, $51,000. You can see the costs of these in-home care or assisted living facility or nursing home facilities as you age, as you start to age out. So these are all things we need to prepare for. Let's take a look at Social Security. Hey, Ari, am I good for the full hour? What time do you need me to stop? You
can stop anytime you want, but somebody said, Mike Webb, of course, always with the good questions. Are there people who are a bad candidate for an HSA/HDHP combo? For example, I used to think that I was a bad candidate since my family was a high dollar healthcare utilizer, but that proved not to be the case.
Well, it used to be if you are spending a lot in healthcare costs each year, the lower deductible plans were thought to be better. But some employers will match the HSA contributions. The tax savings on the, $7,300 plus the catch up, also has to be factored in. So for me, it became a home run. We weren't spending a lot on healthcare, but when I looked at the tax benefit of the $8,000 contribution, when I looked at the fact that my employer was kicking in $500, and then the long-term benefits of letting that money compound, and now the ability to use this tax strategy with my daughter for a few years, I'm upset I didn't do it earlier. Because these are not new. These came out in the Bush administration, the second George Bush administration. I think it was 03 or 04 when HSAs became a thing. I didn't start using it till about 4 years ago. So it's just something, again, you need it to be part of a high deductible health plan. So Mike, I don't know your specifics, but that was the general thinking. But I think with the tax savings, the ability to invest for the long term, any potential employer contributions, and your health insurance premiums are lower with a high deductible plan than on a regular plan. So you save in premiums, you have the tax benefits, the growth, you have to factor all those things in. So we'll go through Social Security, relatively quickly. This is a fairly known topic, but this is one of the components in this presentation. If you're a low income earner, Social Security is going to replace, nearly half, a little bit more than half of your income. If you're a middle income worker, 51,000 a year, Social Security covers about 40% of your replacement income. 82,000, it covers about a third. You're making the taxable wage base or higher, it covers about a quarter of what you'll need in terms of replacement income. So the more you make, the bigger the gap in terms of what Social Security will do to help you meet your retirement needs. We know the Social Security age, the full retirement age has changed over the years. Here's a nice chart that shows full retirement age. For most of us on this call, it's age 67. That could change down the road, but you'll receive 100% of your retirement benefit at age 67. That means that you're locked in for life, and then that benefits your spouse if your benefit is higher than your spouse's. They also get that if you pass away first. You can utilize special claiming options for married couples. You can work in retirement without any earning limits or penalties to your Social Security payout, where if you take Social Security early, if you earn over a certain amount, it impacts your monthly benefit. So the longer you can wait, the more beneficial it is, not just for you, but for your spouse if your spouse outlives you. So that has to be a consideration, because so many Americans sit there with a calendar on their wall in their kitchen with the date they turn 62 circled, and at 9:02 a.m. on their 62nd birthday, they're at the Social Security office saying, give me my money, because that's when they become eligible. But you really need to consider waiting until full retirement age. And here's why. Here's somebody who collected at age 62, somebody at, who was full retirement age a little after age 66, and somebody who waited until age 70. And you could see the monthly benefit is vastly different, over $800 a month difference for somebody who waited 4 years past full retirement age. For somebody who waited to full retirement age, it's still almost $400 a month different. There is a crossover point at age 79 point something, where you start to get more money than if you claimed at age 62. But it's not just about you; it's about your spouse also, and if you want to work in retirement. So let's look at this. If you claim at age 62, you get 75% of what your full benefit would have been. If you claim at age 63, you get 80%. Age 64, 87%. Age 65, 93%. In this case, they're defining full retirement age at age 66 as 100%. But each year you wait after full retirement age, you get an 8% increase for 4 years. So 67, 68, 69, 70, you can get 132%. Now, if you wait longer than that, there's no benefit. So I don't know why you would, but I guess you could. But the maximum you can get is 132% of your benefit if you waited. Saving for retirement, this is something, again, most of us are aware of, and this is part of our education programs. The power of starting earlier and the benefits it reaps. How much will you need to save? How much is enough? So somebody making $35,000 a year, salary increases at 2.5%, planned retirement age. You have all these facts, and there's calculators all over the internet to do this. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. But based on your salary, how much you're going to need, you can see the numbers keep going up for that replacement income of 75%. So I won't spend a lot of time on that. Again, this is just starting earlier. Somebody that starts at age 25 versus 35 versus 45 versus 55. You can see the person that started earlier winds up with the most. How much more each person would need to save to catch up to than if they had started at age 25. This person who waited to age 55 would need to put in $125,000 a year to catch up to where they would have been if they started at age 25 doing $12,000 a year. So again, there's all these types of calculators. I don't want to take up a lot of time. Roth versus traditional, we all know this. The textbooks will make it a wash, because if there was a clear advantage, everybody would do one over the other. So the textbooks will show pre-tax Roth net value in 10 years works out to be equivalent. But we know, the textbook doesn't represent reality. The way I position the Roth is this. If you're in your 20s, 30s, or even 40s, you may want to consider the Roth. You pay the tax now, and in return for not making the government wait, whatever it grows to comes out tax-free. If you're planning on moving from a high tax state like New Jersey, where I am, which you have federal income tax, state income tax, and I've done the Roth, and I've paid federal tax and state income tax, and then I retire to Florida, where there's no income tax. I'm not really getting the full benefit of the Roth. So that's something to consider. But for people in their 20s, I always ask, when I did the education meetings, I would always call somebody that looked really young, and I would typically, land on somebody that was 25 to 30, and I would call them out, and I would say, are you going to be making more money in 10 years than you are now? And some of them would sheepishly say, gee, I hope so. I was like, no, that's the wrong answer. The answer is yes, definitely I'll be making more money in 10 years than I am now. So why not pay the tax now? The tax deduction for a 25-year-old isn't that meaningful. They're getting refunds anyway. They should be doing the Roth and get that 40 years of tax-free growth. The other major advantage for the Roth is, let's look at high net worth individuals. They should have some component of Roth money, because let's say I have $1 million in my 401k, and my wife looks at that and goes, wow, gee, honey, look, we have $1 million in the 401k. And my response would be, no, we don't. That's about 680,000, because it's all taxable. So we don't have $1 million, we have 680. But if we had a Roth, that $1 million would be worth $1 million because it comes out tax-free. Let's say I retire and that $1 million, I look at my wife and I go, well, gee, we can cash in some investments. We can downsize the home. We don't need that $1 million. Let's leave half of it behind for the kids and the grandkids. Well, if it was in a regular 401k, they don't get a $500,000 because it's taxable. But if we did the Roth, my kids and grandkids would get the $500,000 because it's tax-free to them, because they inherit it as a Roth. So you can pay the tax now, downsize the estate by converting some of your traditional money to Roth, and then leave the money behind for your beneficiaries tax-free. Loans in retirement, we know the story here. I won't go through this. This is basic, but for your education meetings, it really hits home. Saving for retirement, challenges women face. 65, women live longer than men. We know that. So their retirement needs are much stronger. Total healthcare costs for women are higher in retirement than men because they live longer. But guess what else happens with women? They earn less. The motherhood penalty. If you leave the workforce for, to have a child and you're out for 3 months and you come back to a different job, not the same job, on average, you're going to take a 3 or 4% pay cut. If you're out 3 to 6 months, same ballpark. If you're out a year, not much of a difference, but now you're 4 to 5%. If you're out more than 12 months, you're coming back at a 7% pay cut. If you're out for more than that, it's an 11% pay cut. So the longer you're out, because of childhood, to raise children, the bigger a pay cut you're going to take when you re-enter the workforce. And then we have the historical problem of women earning less than men in terms of income inequality. So their savings are more challenged. So, women have, they live longer, their expenses are higher, they're not in the workforce typically as long, and they're paid lower due to the income inequality problem we have. It leads to certain challenges that women have in retirement. And then the last component, and we'll wrap up, is Medicare Part A, Part B, Part D. What are they? What do they cover? We're automatically enrolled in Medicare Part A and Part B when we hit 65. This is what they typically cover. Part D is prescription drug coverage. Part A, worked at least 10 years, paid Medicare taxes while working. Part A is typically premium free, but may also come with other costs, deductibles, co-insurance, co-payments, inpatient hospital care, skilled nursing, home health care, hospice, but not nursing homes. Okay? If it's not for medical, it's just for aging, that's not covered. So the biggest expense isn't covered by Medicare. Most people will pay a monthly premium for Part B. And this is critical because the premiums for Part B increase at a faster rate. It's tied to a different COLA table than Social Security. So if Social Security is your only form of income, the increase in your Medicare premiums outpaces the cost of living increases in Social Security. So over time, more and more of your Social Security is going to pay for your Medicare Part B premiums. And that leads to a further erosion in your retirement savings. So just another note there that's not widely known. Medicare Part D is prescription drug coverage. Doesn't cover everything, but your HSAs can help. Eyeglasses, hearing aids, and so on. All right, so that's all I have. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, Ari, and I'll get this out to whoever wants it. Just shoot me an email again one last time. It's william.schories, SCHORIES, at Invesco.com. And Ari, thank you very much for the opportunity. I hope this was well received, and happy to take any questions, from the audience if you want to take live Q&A.
There's just one more. Is having, again from Mike Webb, is having some of your assets in Roth generally a good idea just to diversify your taxes, just like you would diversify your investments?
Absolutely, and absolutely, 100% agree with that. Yeah, you can't, you don't know where tax rates are going. The general consensus is they're going higher. So why not have some in Roth to offset that? You don't know what your tax rate will be in retirement. I personally have a mix of both, but yeah, I think it's a very good strategy. If you're diversifying your investments, it's not a bad idea to diversify your tax base, because early in retirement, for that travel and leisure, for that activity, hey, I want to go on a cruise. I want to withdraw $1,000. Well, wait a minute. I need to withdraw $1,300 because it's taxable. But if I have a Roth, no, there's my 1,000. Boom, I'm done. So it does give some flexibility to how you spend down money in retirement. And remember, Social Security is taxable. So if you want to control your taxable income in retirement, draw down your Roth money first. This way, your Social Security doesn't become taxable. So it's just there's all different strategies in spending, and that's where the industry, I think, hasn't done a great job. We've told people how to save and how much to save. We haven't told people how to spend. But that's where it's critical to have a really good financial advisor that's going to help you and coach you through this.
Exactly. Okay, thanks, Bill. Mark, you ready?
Mark is on mute.
Yeah, well, Mark, he's in the audience. So, Mark, you ready to present?
Hey there, Ari. Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem.
Just getting set up here.
Not a problem. It always takes a minute. It's never instantaneous, no matter, to this day, a couple years of this Zoom stuff, I still can't get my stuff together. I got a point here, I got a point there, It's more difficult than the George Michael sports machine for those people who will understand that reference.
Exactly. I'll be right back with you. Hang on.
For those who don't know, George Michael had a TV show, 11:30s on Sundays, where he had this really fancy looking like VCR, like machine and all that kind of stuff. It was like one of those weird, network TV displays, like the TV production room, and you just hit a button and out came the sports highlights, especially on NFL weekends, which, I think the joke is that when you lived in the dorm like I did, that was like required viewing. You had to watch the George Michael sports machine. But yeah, we used to get them on NBC4 here in New York. And of course, like I said, go to that4ksite.com for further information on all our events. April the 8th, we will be in Phoenix. June 24th, we will be in Miami, and the way things look, there will be baseball. I think there should be some sort of agreement between the owners and players, hopefully very, very soon. Looks very promising. And there you go, Mark. IPX. Take it away.
Thank you, Ari. Hopefully you can see the
We can.
slideshow. Is it the actual?
Plus the complacency, the actual top slide.
Okay, perfect. What do you know? Did it right. Well, thank you. I appreciate all you joining us today and time together. It's nice to be back doing webinars and hopefully get back on the road here soon. Do more of these in person with you, Ari.
Yep.
Today, what I wanted to do was talk a little bit about just the status quo, what really happens with to plans as they continue to just muddle through their day-to-day operations. And as advisors and third-party administrators, what you guys can do to help really shake them up a little bit and provide them almost a solution that can eliminate some of their work, help their business be better, get them working on the things that are more important to them than what people are really struggling with are uncashed checks in retirement plans and missing participants. So what is the cost of complacency? That, well, there it is. It's being slow. There we go. All right. So really, as we turn into the new year, plan reviews are starting to happen. They're taking place. And really, as advisors are preparing for these, it's more of a routine. You know, they go into the process, and really the objective is to fulfill their fiduciary obligation. You know, they want to review the investment options, figure out if there's anything they need to do with regards to a watch list, offer replacements if necessary. They also talk about regulatory and legislative changes, if there's any impact to their plan design, review participation, and discuss other education and service issues. But really, it becomes so routine that there's very little value add to that process. So what can advisors and TPAs do to add value without increasing their actual costs to the plan? Well, we also have to look at risk and what are you, how are you positioned, and are your plan sponsors positioned? Are they taking on more risk than they should? So 2 questions is, how many ERISA lawsuits were filed in the last 2 years? And how much did the EBSA collect from enforcement actions in their fiscal year 2021? 2 questions for you to ponder here for a second. Surprisingly, there were a lot. 149 ERISA lawsuits were filed in the last 2 years. With the Secure Act, they also created penalties to plan sponsors if they fail to provide certain notices. And the DOL actually collected in their enforcement actions over $1.9 billion in their fiscal year. So really, when we're talking about billions of dollars, you know, billions and trillions get thrown around like, you know, pennies and nickels anymore. But really, what does that mean? So if you put the 1.9 billion in perspective, you could spend $10,000 every single day for the next 520 years. So that's a lot of money. They're going after these plan sponsors because of failures in their operational processes. So I think you might be at more risk than what you might realize. And where is the risk coming from? Well, the attorneys, Schlichter started the process, but the other attorneys are smelling a payday here. They have created a blueprint for success in their litigation. You have a lot of smaller firms joining in, and really, what's to lose? You know, you find enough people, certify a class. There's not many plans that haven't come to some type of settlement. So yeah, we're going to continue to see more and more of it. We're also seeing smaller plans being targeted now. So you may think, well, you know, the number of plans that I have or the plans in that I service, you know, they're only, you know, 50, 100 million. But those are the plans that are now being targeted. So really, what can you do to avoid some of the risk that is being brought upon you? You know, you also have the DOL. They discovered a gold mine with missing participants in their 2016 field office in Philadelphia, where they had a pilot program to locate missing participants in qualified plans. Their pilot program recovered $326 million for these missing participants out of DB and DC plans. So they can continue, they're continuing the push in this enforcement priority. So they're continuing to look for plans that have a lot of terminated participants in it, and really using metadata and their logarithms to ferret out audit targets for them, because they have fewer staff as well, but it hasn't stopped them from taking enforcement action and targeting certain employers. What they're also doing is finding plans that are overlooking their details. You know, they're plans that are relying heavily on the record keeper to do a lot of the administration. They think they're doing the work for them, so they have other things to do and they don't necessarily pay attention to the details of what their responsibilities are. They fail to have the written documentation and fail to follow their plan documents. So a lot of these are easy fixes that, you know, as advisors or TPAs, you can go through and highlight some of the areas where things might not be going as smoothly as possible. You know, so really, how big is this problem? You know, the GAO in their research for the Senate back in 2014 estimated that there were 16 million participants that had an account balance of 5,000 or less and went unclaimed. Well, that's a lot of people that, you know, every year move jobs. And since the events from 2020 till now, I mean, this number could easily double. You know, there's a lot more people that are out of the workforce and not returning. So what are they doing with their accounts? You know, they're being left behind. They're forgetting about them. So it's really easy for plan sponsors to get caught up, you know, with all the stuff that was thrown at them in the last 2 years, to forget about some of these basic functions. So can these numbers actually get better? Well, from a plan sponsor's point of view, they definitely can. As advisors and TPAs, really it's your opportunity to add value to the process. Bring this up as an area where we can work together to build a better process that allows them to continue to work on the more important items within their plan or within their daily work anyway. But it's really up to us to help them get to a point where they can eliminate a lot of this risk by some simple changes. So being complacent with what's going on and just continuing to do the same thing day after day and run the same processes time after time for the same terminated participants that have uncashed checks that never bothered to cash them. You know, in the last year, January of 2021, the DOL came out with some guidance on dealing with uncashed checks. One of the big components in there was plans that put the uncashed checks back into a forfeiture account. It was clarified that these plans are still required, according to the DOL, to continue to communicate to those employees and let them know that they have a benefit. I know several plans that I've talked to, large employers, that they use the forfeiture account to put uncashed checks. And once they go into the forfeiture account, they've done nothing with them. They no longer look for them. They've done no work to try and communicate that benefit. So that's a lot of cleanup, a lot of work to, one, identify these people and continue to segregate their money. Unfortunately, a lot of these employers have used those forfeiture dollars to offset other plan expenses or employer contributions. So if somebody does come back for the money, or if all of them come back for the money, the employer's not going to have the assets in there to make payment to those individuals when it was their money to begin with. So really, the IRS allowed it. The DOL doesn't like it, but they acknowledged it and are putting pressure on the employers to do something about it. So beyond just the additional work, you have more compliance filings, adding to the plan's workload to continue to look for these people. And really, their record keepers are not built really for missing participants. Their core functions are administration of the plan, the assets, trading, record keeping aspects of it. Once participant leaves and it's small, there's not a lot for them to really concern themselves with unless the participant makes trades. Once a participant takes a distribution, they even have less incentive to do something for them. So they don't build processes or have the expertise to provide best in class participant location services. Finding better addresses is not their priority. So plans, they just accept subpar results for those services that are not in the wheelhouse of the record keeper. So to give you a little example here of how much this can cost the plan, have had a large manufacturing company, had 8,900 employees, around 1,800 participants in the 401k plan. They were audited by the DOL. The DOL wrote them up, enforcement action, and fined them for those uncashed checks. So they had a failure to provide or maintain a written procedure. They failed to actively search for a better address. They failed to communicate with those former employees. And their defense was that they relied on the record keeper to provide those services. And the DOL said, that's great that you relied on them, but you provided no direction. You're just taking what they've done and thinking that's adequate. And that's what, the DOL clarified last year, was that is not acceptable. So they fined them $2,500 for each uncashed check. It was $125,000 that they had to pay for failure in a process that can be easily rectified. So that came right off their bottom line. They didn't plan for it. So don't be the example. There are many others that I've heard and also experienced where little things in administration can lead to big fines. So what can these simple changes do to help administration? Well, it's garbage in, garbage out, really. I mean, when you first set up a retirement plan, what you need to do is make sure that you're collecting all the data. So anybody out there that is working with a plan, first question that I'm always asking is, how much information are you passing in your contribution file? If you're not passing employment data, it should be included so that the the record keeper can do more of the administration for you. I just had a plan at the end of December. We're going through the force out process and identifying the individuals that were on the list, verifying employment data. Somebody was rehired at the beginning of December. They had 2 payroll remittances, and supposedly the data was being passed to the record keeper. Well, it wasn't being picked up for some reason, and the person showed on the distribution file, and we caught it, but the question went back to the record keeper. We've sent 2 payroll files with employment data. Why isn't it getting picked up? So you also have to evaluate what's being passed and make sure that it is being collected properly. So perform audits of the operation, whether it's distributions, loans, hardships, contribution limits. Those are all things that you can do quick independent audits of for your own plan to make sure that you're following and meeting the requirements of the plan and the DOL requirements as well. So can also look at changing plan design. You know, things that trip plans up. You know, I've working with another plan where we're talking about the force out process, but the administrator has to look back a year to see if that person is going to receive an employer contribution. So they don't make an employer contribution until they file their 5,500. So sometime in August, September of the following year, they're making a 2021 employer contribution. So if they do a force out now and, you know, or the participant takes a distribution, they have the account zeroed out. Well, here comes an employer contribution that drops in, you know, 9 months later. Well, they get picked up on the force out process again. So they're doing it for cash flow reasons, understandable. But if they are wanting to be more compliant and to eliminate some of the additional work that creates for the administration, the plan administrator, you know, should look at either making employer contributions concurrently with the employee contributions over time and maybe doing a true up. But that's just another example of they get so set in how they want to operate it, they don't really figure out how much work that will cost them for their decision. You know, it's many hours for the administrator to do that. So I also want to get these people out of the plan. You know, with that litigation, let's minimize the class that they're trying to certify. If you get these people out of the plan timely, you're going to minimize the people that are participating in it and also could participate in a litigation lawsuit against the employer. So really the other aspect that I talked about a little bit was shopping for experts that supplement the weaknesses of the record keeper. You know, what I'm talking about today, we can provide a lot of services that are more robust than what a record keeper can provide. But, you know, as advisors, you know, TPAs, you have your expertise that can supplement areas of weaknesses that the record keeper has. You know, so you're building a team, and with that, you want to draft the right players. So let's evaluate some of the weak points. Bundled service providers exposes a plan to a lot of providers' weaknesses. Bringing in providers with the strengths to fill those gaps. And as I said, record keeper weaknesses are locating missing participants, handling the de minimis force outs with the Safe Harbor IRA, and managing uncashed checks. Those are key areas where a lot of changes can be made without any cost to the plan sponsor. So if you're interested in helping your plans improve their process, little things can be done to bring in experts that won't cost them another additional service fees for those services that are being provided. So when you're considering, a process and finding the best fit with your employers, you want to build a better process that improves results. So let's review the search process. If you're trying to locate missing participants, some simple questions to ask. Is the record keeper, which provider are they using? How many databases are included in their search? What's their percentage of success for the addresses that they're searching for? How many are being updated? Do they offer the plan sponsor, a dashboard or audit reports to support them in a DOL audit? And most importantly, is it more efficient and cost effective for the plan sponsor and the record keeper to engage in outside services? There's also many variations with Safe Harbor IRA providers. There's different address searches. There's no requirements to look for a new address except once a year. So how do you separate yourself? How do you make yourself different? How do you make yourself better? And how do you really do that for the best interest of the participant? So find out when address search services are done. Are they doing it at setup? Are they doing it when they receive return mail? Are they just looking for a new address if they receive return mail, but they don't do it, until their process a year later? So that coincides with the fees that the participants are being charged and the timing. So some providers charge on a monthly basis, but they don't have an address search until some point in the future when they receive return mail. And if they receive no communication back from the plan participant, it just continues to accumulate. And what are the default investments? Are they guaranteed? Are they not guaranteed? Are they just 40 Act money market fund, with market fluctuation, and taking into account, what's happened in the last 2 years? I've seen government money market rates return zero for the last 18 months. So is that really the best investment vehicle for a Safe Harbor IRA? When there's fees taken and there's no investment return, really, how can you defend that as being in the best interest of the participant? And what additional location efforts are being made to really find these people and get them reconnected with their retirement money? That's the key to these programs. They were set up to be short term. Unfortunately, they become a long-term cash cow for a lot of companies. And they just like sitting on the money. They're making money on the money, which is great, but that's not what this was designed for. So how do you create a product that's safer, provides better rate of return, low cost, and does what it's supposed to do, return money to the participant? Well, that's where we can step in, and how do we measure up? So there's 3 keys in this process. It's, can you find the person? Are you doing everything you can to notify them? And how are you going to resolve their uncashed check, or what IRA product do you have available, and is it best in class? So we're doing a lot to locate these missing participants. We have a plug and play service. We search 9 databases. We look for and locate these people for not only the de minimis force outs, but for required minimum distributions, excess deferrals, excess loan repayments. We can extend the services and locate beneficiaries, run it against the master death file. We also can employ private investigators, go through court records, and provide a proprietary watchdog service that identifies the individual if they make a transaction and provide a new address somewhere. So it's more proactive in locating an individual if they're making a change themselves. Then we look at participant notification. Can manage the entire process from start to finish for a plan. Take it over, but keep them in the loop and provide them the notification they need and the documentation required for any audit. So we have multiple methods to contact these individuals, provide them clear expiration dates and steps that'll be taken if they don't make an election. And do the force out notices, stale dated letters for uncashed checks. We can brand it to the specific company that we're working with, you know, so the plan participant knows that it's part of an employer that they had worked with. It's just not coming out of the blue. And we can modify it to the requirements of each plan or institution that we work with. And most importantly, it's measurable. We have dashboard and provide audit reports so that the plan sponsor can stay abreast of our progress in locating and resolving these issues. Lastly, it's a safe harbor IRA. You know, safe harbor IRA is actually a perfect tool to deal with uncashed checks. So it's part of the administration of the retirement plan, you know, de minimis force outs for accounts under 5,000. So how do you evaluate that? You know, you talked about, when do they look for a new address? What's the fees involved with the administration? What's the default investment? Is it guaranteed? You know, ours, we guarantee principal and interest. Our annual fee is $20, but we don't actually deduct it until the month following account setup. We want to give the participant time to receive the notice and take action before we collect our fee. But that $20 annual administration fee is quite low compared to others in this market. So we also utilize this to deal with the uncashed checks. So plan participants with a stale dated check, they're notified, they don't make an election, the plan sponsor moves that, authorizes it to be set up in the IRA. As it's following the de minimis force out rules, because it's still a plan asset until the participant actually cashes the check. So by doing that, you're eliminating the plan sponsor having to deal with that participant time after time and spending money on every effort that they make. Do it just once and you're done. So it's easy resolution, plug and play. And again, start to finish, it's all taken care of for the plan sponsor. You know, like I said, we're very proud of losing more than 63% of the accounts that we ever set up. May sound odd, but we're excited about that because our process works. We're looking for a new address on every person twice a year, not when we receive return mail. We're not charging additional fees for that search, for any of the searches. So we're trying to look out for the participant and do what's in their best interest and return more of their retirement money that they've saved. So how do we go about getting this started? Well, it's a whole lot easier than you think. Working with all the record keepers, it's a nice integration. We can walk you through step by step. Really, it's a service agreement between us and the plan sponsor. They authorize access for us to receive plan reports. We do the rest. We do the notification. We set up the distributions with the record keeper, and the participant accounts get transferred to us. We set them up, notify them, and then the plan sponsor no longer has responsibility for those individuals. So if you're looking at cleaning up these plans and any of the amendments, restatements that still need to be done with your plans, seriously consider electing the rollover of accounts under $1,000 instead of just a flat cash out. That'll eliminate a lot of uncashed checks and additional work that the plan sponsor will have to follow up on. So that simple change of amending the document to allow rollovers of all accounts under 5,000 will save them time and money and risk of an audit because they'll have fewer uncashed checks in the plan. So really those steps are all that it takes to set this up. And hopefully that it's some good information, reminders for you on how to, make your plan's administrative life a lot better. Any questions?
Just to Earl Garvin wants to know, will the slides be made available? I guess if
Yes.
they contact you, you'll make those slides available.
Yes.
And Mike Webb, always with the great questions. Why are
Yeah.
there so many missing participants in the first place in this era of technology, where even fugitives can sometimes be located? Is it a record keeper or TPA laziness?
No, there are a lot of missing persons, and at another plan that we did find a fugitive. So yes, you're right. They can be found. Some of the problems, that social media and LinkedIn, whatever, that the DOL recommended using is, how do you know that that's the right person? And until some of these services that do locations like LexisNexis, for example, I've not found their data to be particularly accurate. They do some good work, but just a straight up address update, I've seen better results from other providers. But a lot of the record keepers use LexisNexis because it's a plug and play, it's cheap, and they can, not affect their margins too much. So they're giving it the college try, but they're meeting their obligation, the bare minimum obligation. And if you really want to get serious about finding these people, these companies need to do more than meet their minimum obligations.
Last but not least, Tiffany Lauer wants to know, did you mention your costs for your services? That's just based on just getting participant IRAs and whatnot. Is that right?
Yeah, there's no plan or plan sponsored cost to do the safe harbor IRA process. There's a $20 annual fee to the participant once the account gets established. Like I said, we don't actually deduct that until the month following the account setup. We don't have a statement fee. We don't have search fees. Our distribution fee is $20 if they take a distribution and close the account. So 20 in, 20 out. If we need to perform more in-depth searches, that would be based on the volume and frequency, because it does take some time and effort, and it does cost some money to engage these private investigators and do some of the other extensive searches that we do. But I can tell you, I know Fidelity offers an enhanced address search process, and the plans that I've talked to 3 plans, and they had gotten quotes from Fidelity on this, and they were from $22 to, I think it was $38 per person per search. So if they don't get an update, or if they send out a notice and there's no response, they're still on the list. They get charged every time they search for that person. So, there's a lot of cost involved in that, and our cost to do that is significantly less.
Got it. Okay, Mark, I appreciate it. Next presentation before our break until tomorrow, Teresa Conti, who I saw last week in Las Vegas, gave a great presentation on one of my favorite subjects, which is 401k issues and corrections, which I wrote an article about it a few years back, Foul Ups, Bleeps, and Blunders, which was an ode to the Don Rickles, Steve Lawrence blooper show, The Number I Saw. But I loved mess ups, and this presentation's full of planned mess ups and how to fix it. So Teresa, take it away.
Can you see my screen okay, Ari, or am I? Okay. All right. So thanks Ari for having me, and I'm happy to be here. Yeah, 401k corrections and things are something I spend a ton of time doing. So I really wanted to just take you through some of the biggest corrections and things we see in plans, and some of the things that we try to head off as TPAs and that you as an advisor can definitely help us with as well. So our agenda today is looking at the importance of the census, common compensation errors, and like we spend a lot of time on compensation, enrollment and eligibility, timely deposits, knowing the plan document, and a little bit of an update on the Secure Act, because it's really a time to start thinking about a few of those things, and I'll leave some time definitely for questions. So I'm going to dive right in and talk about census. So, one of the biggest mistakes that we see is employers don't give us all employees when they give us annual census data, right? One of the ways to offset that, of course, is to ask them to give us complete census data via their payroll provider each pay period, right? And then it can accumulate at the record keeper, and we can take that, and then it's really just a review. But I always tell my team, watch for things. There's definitely some things that you can head off right away. If I get a census that doesn't have one date of term, that's an issue. If I get a census that shows only, everybody with deferrals, unless they're an automatic enrollment plan, that's probably not going to happen. And even an automatic enrollment plan, that's not going to 100% happen. we actually ask our employers to also give us a copy of the W-3 so we can tie out that census file to the W-3 and make sure everything's matching. So, you know, what could happen if we don't get complete census data, right? We may not give a contribution to everybody who's eligible. The ADP and ACP testing would be done incorrectly. Maybe the top-heavy contribution wasn't given to everybody, right? And what would happen is if we discover that, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, is that could result in additional contributions being due to the plan. So we always want to avoid that. We always try to make sure census is complete. We always have census questions with plans. You know, this person was on your census last year and you didn't report them this year, but they didn't have a data hire last year. You know, those types of things are things we come across every single day. So when it comes to compensation, compensation is also tricky, right? Because we have to make sure that they are following the definition of compensations in the document. I typically tell clients, don't try to exclude comp. There's definitely things, and I'll talk about it in a little bit, that can go wrong when we try to exclude compensation from a plan, right? Using complete comp is usually the easiest way. Making sure we have everything included, trying to use different definitions of comp for different contributions is tricky. You know, how about if the plan defines comp as W-2 wages for deferral, but doesn't withhold deferrals from the bonus checks, right? So definitely some things, and knowing compensation and knowing what your document says is really important. And I actually did a similar webinar to this for all of our clients late last year, because I thought it was important reminders for them to know, you know, what's happening with that. Another thing that comes up, particularly in this area of now how we can adopt plans after the year end, is really thinking about what compensation. Sorry, I don't know who's doing that. I don't know whose phone that was ringing. It's not mine. So compensation is definitely something to also think about. Remember that in a corporation, right? If we have a corporation that for an owner, right, it's what's on my W-2, right? Whatever flows through to my K-1, because as an S Corp, I also get a K-1, it's not compensation for retirement plan purposes, right? So making sure, particularly in this era where we can adopt a plan after year end, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, right? Making sure that they have enough compensation to substantiate a contribution is crucial. Now, if we have a plan, sorry, my slides aren't going. There we go. If we have a plan that's an unincorporated business, right, a sole proprietor, a partnership, or an LLC taxed as a partnership, right, we can use earnings from self-employment, right? What flows through to their K-1 or what flows through their Schedule C, depending on what type of entity they are, is income that we can use. So they're in a little different situation. Where that can become tricky is if they're trying to not show much revenue, it really means they may not have much earnings for retirement plans. So definitely a conversation that I love to have with CPAs, you know, talking about that. And if they're really trying to max out contributions, really trying to make sure we have the compensation to make that really work. I always like to go through this with a client, particularly when they really want to kind of exclude compensation. So let's say we have a safe harbor plan with a 3% non-elective contribution. The compensation definition is W-2 wages, but net of overtime, right? So if we have a plan that excludes compensation, we have to run a test on that. It's called a 414S, where it compares it compares the compensation of the highly comps to the non-highly comps, right? And you have to be within usually they say about a 3 percentage point difference, right? So let's say traditionally, right, the plan didn't have a ton of people who got overtime. So it was never a problem to pass that test, right? They didn't have a lot of overtime pay, so it never became an issue. And we all know highly comps don't typically get overtime, right? So it's really the non-highly comps who are excluding. But in 2020, we had a worker shortage, you know, so now they had to pay a lot of additional overtime to their non-highly compensated employees, right? Because that's how they got the work done. That's how they kept their business going, right? So now that test no longer passes. Now it fails. So what do? How do we fix this mistake? Because we can't, of course, let that happen. So we can use the self-correction program. We can give those non-highly compensated employees the additional 3% contribution for their overtime, right? But we also then have to calculate lost earnings on that missed contribution, right? So definitely something to consider. Could turn into a pretty big correction. We do need to correct it by the end of the following plan year. So if it was a 2020 mistake, we'd have to correct it by 12/31/2021. Keep all the documentation relating to that in case of audit ever happens or anything. And then we might want to consider amending that plan document to no longer have that overtime exclusion. I go through this kind of scenario with the plan sponsor, and they typically will back down about it when I can talk about all the things that could happen and how this could happen. So it's really, I try to convince them all the time to use complete comp. Let me stop for a minute. I can't see the chat, so I don't know if we have any questions, but I'm assuming Ari will stop me if we do. So I'm going to just roll right in.
One of the questions, will the slide deck for the session be provided?
Yep. If they reach out to me, I'll have my contact info at the end. I'm happy to provide it for them. Yep. Okay. Perfect. I'm going to roll right into enrollment and eligibility. This is another one where, especially when we're dealing with a takeover plan, you know, I always talk to plan sponsors and say, tell me what you are doing. Tell me what you're really doing in practice, right? If the plan comes to me and it's a 1-year eligibility and semi-annual entry dates, but they're letting people in, you know, the beginning of the month following their 1 year, well, we're not following the document. So we have an operational thing. So we need to really make sure that we understand and that they understand really when an employee becomes eligible. Thankfully, in today's world, if you are giving more complete census data, the record keepers can help you track that, which I think is a really great thing. The correction to do that, if you miss making somebody eligible, is to make an additional contribution to the employee to compensate for that missed deferral, right? And the other thing I always talk about is part-time employees. Like sometimes employers say to me, I don't want to include part-time employees. Well, your definition of part-time and the IRS's definition of part-time might be different. So I can tell you in our employee handbook, anybody who works less than 30 hours a week, to me, is considered part-time. But though that 30-hour-a-week employee would still probably work 1,000 hours during a plan year. So they may still be eligible for a 401k plan. So definitely something to think about. I also caution clients on automatic enrollment. I love automatic enrollment. I think it's a great way to get people to save. All the statistics are out there as to why saving is good and people don't opt out. And I think all that's great. Where it can become problematic is just making sure you enroll the employees that need to enroll. I think that's less problematic than like auto escalation, because I think that's harder from an administrative standpoint. But as long as we have the processes and procedures in place, you can always make that work. And definitely a good thing to think about and talk about. And more plan sponsors are definitely doing it. I'm going to talk a little bit about timely deposit of contributions. I feel like I beat this topic to death all the time, but I will tell you, we still have tons of clients who have late deposits every year, because especially now with turnover, right? The HR person who used to do it isn't there anymore. The payroll person who used to do it isn't there anymore. Nobody else knows how to do it, or nobody else even thinks about it, right? I actually just talked to a client yesterday that hasn't made a deposit since the beginning of November. And that's definitely problematic, right? We made them aware of it. We're trying to get them to fix it, but they have to give us some of that data and work with us and the record keeper to make that happen. So I always say that you should make those deposits the earliest that you can segregate them from the general assets of the plan. So like I run my payrolls on Fridays. Usually on Monday is when I go out and post that contribution, so that it gets there in a day or two after that. And I'm definitely meeting like the 7-day business safe harbor. But, and I get asked this question a lot. Well, let's say I typically do it in 1 and 2 days. And then the next time I miss, I go to the 7 days. What does that look like? Well, if you get audited, they may say, well, typically you always did it in 2 days. Why this time did you do it in 7? And you might have to make up lost earnings. We can definitely, again, correct them through the employee plan correction resolution system. We determine the late deposits, calculate lost earnings, deposit all of those, review our procedures and correct the deficiencies. And so I usually recommend making a document that definitely talks about that. Ari, I'm going to stop again just to make sure we don't have any questions.
We don't have any.
Okay, perfect. So in the case of the audit, this is just the reminder, they will review the ability to deposit timely and make sure you actually are submitting timely. So just kind of my little reminder there. Knowing your plan document. So I talked about this a little bit ago where I talked about eligibility, right? Understanding what the plan document says and what you should be doing. We can always amend the document if you want to do something different. So definitely think about that. Keep making sure your plan document is updated and all necessary and annual amendments have been adopted, right? That's a big one. I tell plan sponsors all the time, you should keep all your plan documents like since inception. I know that they wouldn't usually ask for that in the case of an audit, but I think there's no harm in having those. Other documents you keep typically for 7 years or so, right? To be past kind of that audit thing. But what happens if you don't follow the terms of the plan? What happens if that happens? So what I always say is we have to do a reasonable correction that would put affected participants in the position they would have been in if we hadn't made that mistake. So that's always the most important thing, right? That we make participants whole, make them where they need to be. I'm going to talk for a minute about the cycle 3 restatements. That deadline is quickly approaching. It is July 31st of this year. It is really a great time to review service providers, review plan provisions, work together to approach our clients, right? Show our value together, a TPA and an advisor working together to really make sure that's happening. We have a lot of our clients' restatements done. I've heard of some TPAs that do not have hardly any done, and I'm not sure how you're going to get them done, but definitely keep that deadline in mind. Make sure your client's restatement has been done. It's a very important deadline to make sure we meet that. And I haven't heard any word about that date being extended. So I would think by now we probably would have known that, but it has not yet been. I have not heard anything about it being extended. So assume that's a firm date. So I talked about this a little bit before. I want to just cover it a little bit more. So, you know, I haven't filed my 2021 taxes yet, right? It's early. It's only the end of January, right? Can I still offer a safe harbor non-elective for the 2021 plan year? Yeah, we can. So we can now go back. We didn't have to have that plan set up anymore by December 31st. It now has to be, it now just really has to be set up by the due date of their tax return with extensions. But also remember that if we're doing that, it also has to be funded by that date. So it's not like we can go on September 14th, which would be the extended, or September 15th, which would be the extended due date of a corporate tax return, and come to me on September 14th and say, hey, we want to make this contribution. Well, we would have had to we have to do a plan document, we have to do the calculations, we have to get that funded. So that's not going to work. But my answer is we still do have time. I still have some advisors I work with that are coming to me and saying, hey, this client had a lot more money than they expected to have last year. Can we still set up a plan? And yes, we can. Most of the time we're doing profit sharing or a DB cash balance. And that's what we're doing to get some funding in for 2021. Again, it is very, very important that we had enough compensation to substantiate that for the owners, but definitely something we can look at, right? And it doesn't really make sense to do a safe harbor non-elective in that, but if we had a 401k plan that had an existing plan, could we still make that? Yes, we could do that. We'd have to do a 4% instead of 3%, but we can definitely make that work. Safe harbor match, we would only be able to add as of the beginning of the next plan year. So just some reminders there for you. I like to remind clients of this about the higher penalties that have recently come out for Form 5500. They went up 1,000%. It's a huge increase in those fees. I typically work on several clients every year who need delinquent filer, but if they've never gotten a notice, delinquent filer is really a great option. It's our friend. It's the penalty's low. Once we file that return, it's done. It's really, really great. So if you come across a plan that's having an issue or need something like that, I always say to clients, we can correct pretty much anything. So it's just a matter of figuring out what needs to be correct and what's the best method. One more thing I'll put up here for you. People think it's funny that I do refer to the IRS website, but the IRS has some really great information. They do have this 401k plan fix-it guide out there. So if you come across a plan that has a problem, maybe something I didn't cover here today, they actually have kind of all the big things they saw and how to really correct those. Any ERISA attorney or really good TPA can typically help you correct those as well. But the IRS website is this particularly. I love this 401k plan fix-it guide. It really gives you some really great information. That's it for me for my formal presentation. I know we wanted to get out of here on time, so I did go kind of quickly, but there's definitely, of course, way many more things I could cover. But this is my contact information. If you want a copy of the presentation, please let me know or have any questions. Ari, we can open it up to any questions anybody has.
I did not see any further questions.
Okay, I must have done a good job then. All right, I'll stop sharing. Thank you again for having me. Yeah, so thanks again for having me. It was fun in Vegas and good to be here today.
Thank you. And we will be back tomorrow at, like I said, 11:30 a.m. in the morning for another 2.5 hours of that 401k National Virtual Conference. And if you missed any moment of it this weekend, we will upload it to YouTube, and I'll let all the attendees and the participants, panelists know when it's going to be up. So until then, I'll see you tomorrow morning at 11:30 a.m. Eastern. Thanks.